All right, Kayla. Tough season for the Sixers. They've been winning lately. But is the process over?
So I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and a lot of people want to say, is the process over? I don't think it truly is over until Joel Embiid is done with his career, right? Because it starts with Joel, and I still think he has a little bit more left in the tank. Now, he said in this season, I have 8 years left to play. That's definitely not happening. But if for some reason he can come back and kind of have that Kawhi treatment and not really play throughout the season, come back during the playoffs or even next year while Paul George is still on that contract, I don't think it's truly over until Joel Embiid is done, not necessarily in his prime anymore, and the team flips over to Tyrese Maxey. So I'm not going to say it's over, but it's not looking too promising. That's what I will say.
It's not looking promising at all. They're losing when they're supposed to win. They're winning when they're supposed to lose, but they have been winning lately. Is there newfound hope for your Sixers, Kayla? Is there newfound hope?
I think that there is. It's crazy to say. Now, this is what I will say. The Eastern Conference is not super competitive this year like the Western Conference. If you kind of look down from 5 to 11 range, and the Philadelphia 76ers right now are right behind the Chicago Bulls, and if they go above them, they are in play-in contention, so they have a chance to make the playoffs. Now, do I think that they're going to win the NBA championship or even get past the second round? No, I don't think that's realistic, but I do think that if they can get into the playoffs, that'd be a tough first-round matchup for the Cavs or the Celtics if that's who they end up playing, if that's where they get. What I will say, too, is that the 76ers are in a situation where they really can't tank because the Wizards are a team that's really bad right now, and the Wizards are not going to allow the 76ers to lose less games than them. So they're kind of in that middle ground. But what I will say is that this is the Tyrese Maxey that 76ers fans have been waiting for. He's starting to really play at that all-star level, and I think it took him some time to figure out that he can be the guy, but he doesn't have to put so much pressure on himself. Before, he was playing a little bit more intense. Now he's playing a little bit more free. He's getting other guys involved. Do I think that the 76ers are going to be a team to be going into the playoffs? No, but I do think that Tyrese Maxey single-handedly can turn this team around.
He seemed a little bit upset in the beginning of the season. I think he talked to his family a little bit, and now he's just a happier guy, it seems like.
Yeah, and that's kind of what he said in the post-game press conference, right? It was his parents going to him and saying, you're not happy, you're not yourself. And I think as soon as he heard that, especially from your parents, when you hear that from your parents, the ones that have supported you along the way, you're like, all right, well, maybe I really am not happy because they know them better than anybody else. So when Tyrese Maxey heard that, he said, yeah, I'm not happy, I'm not playing the way I want to. And I think that just flipped a switch. Now, granted, it's really only 4 games, but at the same time, it's been a tough year for Tyrese Maxey. He thought that he was going to play with Joel Embiid and Paul George. He's had to be a leader. He called Joel Embiid out even in the locker room. So he's had to step up in a different way that I'm sure that he thought that he would. And now it really is starting to click. And I know people are going to be upset that he didn't make the All-Star game. He didn't have necessarily the numbers, and the 76ers didn't have the record to push him in that All-Star game. But if he continues to play like an All-Star player throughout the rest of the season, I think we're going to see a happier Tyrese Maxey.
You mentioned Paul George, and I definitely wanted to get to PG8. The guy's doing headstands in practice. He's bored playing center. He's questioning his own Hall of Fame career, which I think he's a Hall of Famer. What have you made of PG8's stint in Philly?
It's been a little bit rough. I think the biggest thing that you look at is a lot of people kind of thought this is what Paul George was going to be like, right? He's not in the prime of his career. I'm not saying that he's a bad player, but he's not the Paul George that the 76ers could possibly want on this team. What I will say is a few games ago against the Cavs, you really saw the best Paul George game. He only had 9 points in that first half and then erupted and was the leading scorer for the Philadelphia 76ers at the end of that game. But he's injury prone. That's the biggest thing. And I know people are going to say, well, so is Joel Embiid, this, that, and the other. Yes, he is. But Paul George, he finally has a good game, and then all of a sudden he injures his finger against the Bulls, so he just can't catch a break. It hasn't been anything that I expected. I did expect him to play a lot better, and my biggest worry with Paul George is that he still hasn't figured it out with Joel Embiid in the lineup. Now, his numbers haven't necessarily been fantastic without Joel Embiid, but they've been better with the 2-man game with him and Tyrese Maxey. That 3-man game is something they just haven't had time to figure out, so that's a little bit worrisome for me. I don't necessarily think Paul George is the answer. Now, the 76ers have a huge contract that a lot of teams are not going to want, so at the end of the day, I think Paul George is a good player, but he's not the Paul George, like a playoff P that we've been used to seeing throughout his career.
I mean, we've seen Russell Westbrook have a resurgence now. Clay plays well with the Mavs. I mean, he could get back to winning basketball, don't you think, Kayla?
I don't know. I think he's going to have a hard time playing with Joel Embiid, and that's not a knock against Embiid. I just think when you have so much star power out there, and Paul George says he's fine playing off the ball, but I just don't think that's how Paul George is able to play at his best, and I think that can be tough. So Paul George, if he can shoot better, I think it will work out, but it's not like he's a spot-up shooter either, right? He wants the ball in his hands, and it's going to take time for that to mesh, and I just don't think the 76ers have that time because, yeah, all these players can come back when it comes to playoffs, but you have no team chemistry, and that has really hurt Paul George throughout the season, trying to just get in the mix with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah, do you think the fit with Maxey is more tough than the fit with Joel because Maxey is a guy that likes to have the basketball as a guard?
No, I think the fit's tougher with Joel, if I'm going to be honest with you, because I think we've seen Tyrese Maxey and Paul George play well together. It's when you add Joel Embiid, and I'm not even saying it's Paul George and Joel Embiid, it's the three of them all together, right? Because when Tyrese Maxey is in there, Tyrese and Joel Embiid have one of the best two-man games in the entire league. We haven't really seen it throughout the season, but when we do see it, it is very, very good. Now, how do you add Paul George into that equation? I think PG and Joel could play decently together. We haven't seen that throughout the year either, but the three-man game is really what the issue is because Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid are used to playing together. Now, PG can play alongside Tyrese Maxey, but when you put Joel in there, who can play in the middle, who can play on the outside, it makes it a little bit tougher for Paul George to really find his offensive game.
What are your thoughts on those that say they should just start tanking right now, the 76ers?
I don't think it's possible, as I alluded to. I think the Wizards are a team that you look at and you say, okay, well, they're not going to allow the 76ers to get that number one pick. And Adam Silver, I also don't think by any means is going to allow the Philadelphia 76ers to get that number one pick after the process years. We knew Adam Silver wasn't a big fan of that. So I don't think that they should tank, and I say that because you look at this season, and I do think they have a realistic chance of making the playoffs in that play-in tournament just because the Eastern Conference isn't that competitive. I mean, they are way below 500, and they're only in 11th place, and really only a few games back from the Bulls that are in 10th right now. So with that play-in tournament that it was implemented a few seasons ago, they have a real chance of making the playoffs. Now, do I think that they should maybe shut down Joel Embiid? I think that you look at the severity of what he's going through right now because no matter what to me, even if Joel Embiid comes back, you're still not going to win an NBA championship. This team just doesn't have it this year. So do you sit him down and shut him down for the rest of the season? If it's really that bad, I think you can do that, but I don't think they necessarily have a tank. I think they have enough pieces that they can get into that 10th spot and they could possibly get into the playoffs, but they're going to be knocked out after the first round. So it's a loss of a season no matter which way you look at it.
That's interesting. They say organizations tank, but not players. So you would say have those guys go out, play hard, but just sit and beat down?
If he is as bad as we think he is. Now, there was doctors in the beginning of the season saying with his knee after he played in the Olympics that Joel Embiid should not have even played this season. So that leads me to believe that no matter if he sits out, if he plays consecutive games, then he might be out for the next 11, and that's not worth it to continue to push him. I don't think the 76ers are good enough to win a bunch of playoff games without him, but I do think at the same time that they could possibly make that play and push. Because the thing is, if you tank, you're not going to get anything out of it. There's teams that are worse than the 76ers that have continued to be worse this season in terms of a win-loss record that are going to get those top spots once the draft comes around. So it's not like you're going to get a top 1 or 2 pick anyway, so I think you just play hard, you go out there. But if Joel Embiid is as bad as the doctors thought that he was in the beginning of the season, yes, you sit him, because then what comes worse of that? It's only going to get worse. He hasn't been healthy really in the playoffs throughout his entire career, so why push it if you don't need to? Because no matter what, they're not going to make the finals anyway, even if Joel Embiid plays.
So going back to last year, Sixers versus Knicks, I mean, you watched the Sixers closely. I watched that series closely. And Joel Embiid was playing really well, but his knee did not look right even then.
It didn't, and that was the whole reason I said that he shouldn't play the Olympics, because he was injured. Once again, he hasn't had a healthy playoff series. So when you talk about him not being healthy against the Knicks, and then you say, oh, we'll go play for the Olympics, and I get it. Winning a gold medal for Team USA is probably anybody's dream, right? But as soon as they decided to sit Kawhi, and Kawhi didn't play with the Olympic team, I said, okay, Joel Embiid should follow suit, because if he plays in the Olympics, it's going to be worse because he has no time to heal, and that's exactly what happened. So he hasn't been 100% since before that playoff run against the New York Knicks. You can't even call it a run at that, but before the playoff games in that series. So it's been really, really tough, and it's that same injury that's happening. You know, we looked at the face fracture as well this year. We looked at different things with the ankle and things like that, but it's really the knee that's bothering him, and that's why he's out for an extended period of time, because he can play a few games, but then that swelling comes back and starts to hurt him, and that dwindles the games that he can play going forward.
What's the best case scenario? Will we ever see MVP level Joel Embiid again for a long period of time?
Oh, that's so tough, because you're not going to see it this year. I do think if they shut him down, you might see it next year, but I don't think that Joel Embiid has a lot more time left in his prime. I just really don't. His body gives out on him. And listen, Joel Embiid, I have been able to watch the Sixers my entire life. I'm from Philadelphia. I grew up in South Jersey as well. And the best superstar since Joel Embiid has been Allen Iverson. They have not had a superstar since Allen Iverson. And you're talking about the AI that was in the 0-1 finals against the Los Angeles Lakers, right? So it is really hard for me to say that Joel Embiid, the latest superstar that the 76ers have been longing for, might be done after a year or two, but I just don't think his prime goes that much longer. You know, he is so dominant and he can play so well, and if it wasn't for the injuries, he would be the best big in the league currently, but at the same time, when you look at it, his body is just not made for the style of way that he plays. So I think that he realistically has 2 more years. Maybe next year can be that year. If they end up keeping Paul George, they get some other pieces as well. But you might see an MVP caliber season in a year or two. After that, I think this team goes to Tyrese Maxey.
I assume you're not a fan of trading Jared McCain, right? For someone.
Oh, no. I actually, it's funny you bring that up because I said this on my Locked On 76ers podcast too, that I was all for Dalton Connect. I did not want the 76ers to draft McCain. Yeah. And Connect was on the board because I thought he was more of a win-now player. And I thought McCain was more of a future player with Tyrese Maxey, because I thought that the 76ers bringing Paul George in and everything like that, they wanted to win now with Joel Embiid, knowing he doesn't have a lot of time left in his prime. But Jared McCain surprised me. I will be honest. He kind of proved all the haters wrong because he is an absolute ball player, and I'm so excited for him to get healthy and be back on that court again.
Speaking of NBA futures, you got to watch the Lakers versus the Sixers. And Bronny had a tough night. I don't know why they had him guarding Tyrese out there, Kayla. But you know, you cover the G League, you cover the NBA, so I think you're a great person to ask. How do you look at Bronny in terms of trajectory when you're looking at his age, how he is now, what kind of player you think he'll become in the future?
This is no disrespect to the James family, because I think what LeBron has been able to do and the platform that he's created, not only for himself but for his kids, is fantastic. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, and people can quote me on this, and they can bash me, whatever it might be. Bryce James is the better James. I saw Bryce James at the Hoop Hall tournament with Sierra Cannon, and he's going to Arizona. Now, granted, he doesn't start on that team. He's kind of 8th or 9th off the bench, but he has a little bit more in his toolbox. I think the thing about Bronny, which excites so many people, is his athleticism, his dunking ability, what he can do. He's not really that good of a shooter, and I just think that Bronny in the NBA is not tall enough where Bronny was in high school, being able to go out there, have these fantastic dunks, make people excited. So, you know, I think Bronny can be a decent role player. I don't think he'll ever be a starter on a team. You know, I think that he's going to split some time on assignment with G League teams or be a two-way player for the majority of his career. Maybe he'll surprise me, but I do see that Bryce James is a little bit of a better player. He has more in his toolbox. He's a little bit more technical, has a really good shot to him as well, and he's still in high school. So what he's going to be able to do at Arizona in a college locker room, weight room with college coaches, I think that you might be hearing his name, which now you've really only heard Bronny James because he's really the, oldest son of LeBron. And it's no disrespect to Bronny. I just don't see his game really transitioning into anything super spectacular because he doesn't have that shot consistently either yet at this point.
From a size standpoint, Bryce is the bigger player, right? How tall is
Yes, Bryce is taller than Bronny. I don't know exact measurements, but Bryce is also taller than Bronny. Now, Bronny has a little bit more mass to him, but once Bryce gets in to a college weight room, that could change a little bit. So that's the thing too. Bronny's really athletic, but his height is kind of diminishing how he can go up there and get that bounce in the NBA against players that are taller, that are bigger, that are stronger, where Bryce is taller. He is the taller James. So, and I think the thing about Bryce James too, he's not only taller, but he plays more of a guard, shooting guard position as well. So that can be really beneficial when you're trying to get him in front of college coaches, being able to develop that and see what he can do at the next level if he pursues the NBA, if he gets into the NBA and things like that.
So you mentioned Bryce going to college. College is, I feel like it's been an uptick lately. Like everybody's so interested in college, partly because of NIL and the transfer portal is a little crazy. Comparing it to the G League, though, how do we get the G League more notoriety? Because it really is one of the best leagues in the world in terms of talent.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because they had the G League team that was out of LA and G League Ignite, and they had kind of those one-and-done players, or maybe that players that want to go to college that wanted to play in the G League. And I think my biggest issue with that was I knew it wasn't going to work because you're talking about 17, 18-year-olds going up against grown men, right? And the realistic part of it is you're looking at, and I covered the Delaware Bluecoats, which is the 76ers NBA G League team. You're looking at Jared Brownridge, who has been in the G for about 10 years, also been with some NBA squads as well. So I think it's tough. I don't think it gains enough respect because you look at all the different leagues in just professional sports. You look at MLB, right? They have the minors that you can go through and things like that. All NBA has is the G League. That's kind of what they want to go through and everything. I think it would be interesting if they if you did a one and done and you could just go right to the G, and maybe they created a team after that. I don't think going right out of high school to the G League is smart just because they're young, the maturity level isn't there, and I think when you're going up against teams that have vets that have been there for a really long time, it can get hard. So I just think marketing-wise, too, I think they need to market it a little bit better because that is the developmental league, and you're even seeing with the 76ers, players that might, their end-all, be-all might be staying in the G, but there's no problem with that. You're still playing professional basketball at a high level, and that's a huge honor for anybody that gets the opportunity to do that. But there's also a lot of players that are there right now that are going to be future stars in the NBA that people kind of overlook too. So I do think it's important that it gets more notoriety, and I think just the marketing of it, for example, like Justin Edwards with the Philadelphia 76ers, right? Talk about that storyline a little bit more of how he's with the Bluecoats, how he's 21 years old, and he didn't play well at Kentucky. He only averaged 8 points, but he was a really good high school basketball player, but he absolutely lit it up with the Delaware Bluecoats, and Justin Edwards really told us too that, hey, if it wasn't for the Bluecoats and I didn't start out in the G League, I wouldn't be able to have this success in the NBA because that's where it helped me. It helped me mature. It helped me develop. So I think those are important storylines to continue going on throughout NBA broadcasts as well.
Is there a way to brand it where even though it is a development league, maybe just brand it as this is a great league instead of – because, so much of our great talent has to go overseas. I think it would be beneficial if we could get it to a place where those guys could actually just play in the G League. I guess the G League is better than calling it the D League. We made a little bit of a step in that direction, but I think we need to brand it better because there's just so much talent already in that league.
There is, and I just think you need to look at it as the NBA is professional basketball and so is the G League, right? It's all 100%. Professional basketball at the end of the day. And I think people don't realize that basketball is one of the toughest sports to get into professionally. I also cover a lot of high school basketball, and if there's a talented kid that plays football and basketball, 99% of the time the coaches say you will have a better opportunity at going for football only because there's more roster spots open. There's more opportunity in football because the teams are just bigger. When you're going on an NBA basketball team, it's 12, 15 guys deep, and then you don't know where else to go at that point, whether it's overseas or the NBA G League as well. So the G League's also tough to get in, right? When you go to these open tryouts, there is hundreds and 500 people trying out, and the coaches might select one or two, maybe not even anybody at the same time. So, and those roster spots usually go to players that maybe have been there or players that, the organization is looking at as possibly a young talent that they can move up and that they could work with, or a trade asset and things like that. So at the end of the day, I think people just need to say it's professional basketball. Whether you're overseas, whether you're in the G League or the NBA, you are playing professional basketball, and that is a huge and a big accomplishment no matter what level you're at.
Do you like when they experiment in the G League? Like they did the 2-for-1 free throws. Maybe they'll add a 4-point line at some point. Who knows?
Yeah, I do enjoy it, and it's always interesting because I feel like they always come up with such different rules. Like they do a target score for overtime, kind of they did with the All-Star game.
Elam ending, yep.
Yeah, and they actually did that before the All-Star game, so they were kind of, messing with that as well. But I think it really is interesting because it also allows the players that are there to kind of see it first, and then if they end up, getting on an NBA squad, then they're like, all right, I kind of already know what this is, and it just moves the game along a little bit faster. There's a little bit more of a flow to it as well, and I think it's a little bit more pressure because everybody said, you got to make your free throws. They say that at the youngest level. Well, if you only have one that counts for two, it's like, all right, well, this is the one that could put us up 2 points, or it's even one that counts for three, too. This is all until the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter, then it's back to regular NBA rules. So I do like it, and I think it's a good opportunity to be able to experiment those things, and that's how they kind of did the tournament, the in-season tournament with the NBA as well, because the G League has that showcase tournament before they get into the regular season, too.
Adam Silver comes out yesterday and says he's a fan of 10-minute quarters. And, Kayla, I've been saying this for a while. I like it. You're nodding your head, but I like it. What are your thoughts on it? I think it's great because players have to get right to it when it's 10-minute quarters. There's no playing around. I played overseas in Europe, and when over there, you have to play right away, right from the start. Here, you could kind of, ease your way into the game. What are your thoughts on it?
I don't love it, and I'm only going to say this. So I'm also not a fan. This goes back to not being a fan of the in-season tournament either, and I think that Adam Silver is trying to do this to shorten the game because I think that he's realizing that when players don't play and they're on load management, and although they try to stop load management, players are really still doing it. I think he's trying to just allow more viewers to actually get more ratings up there for the NBA, TV ratings and things like that. And if you make the game shorter, it could be an opportunity to be like, okay, well now I don't have to spend as much time sitting there watching it. These players will get right into it, like you said, and it'll be really exciting from tip off to the end. I just don't think you should change the game as of right now. I think it's really going to change the implement of the game. I don't love it, and I get why Adam Silver's trying to do it, and he's a really good businessman. But at the same time, it's been like this for such a long time, and I just feel that for me as an analyst and not watching it as a fan, I enjoy when the players are trying to get to it and they're trying to, figure out what they can do throughout the game, and then they finally push for. And it's funny, I always remember my dad told me when I was younger, oh, you only need to watch the fourth quarter of a basketball game. That's when it gets interesting. I look at it from an analyst point of view, and I think every single part and every single minute is important of a basketball game. So I think for fans it would be better. From an analyst point of view and a writer and a broadcaster, I don't love it because I think there's important storylines you can get out there. I think there's important, developmental factors. I think when you start out a game slow but end it on a high note, that's a whole storyline to a game. So for fans, I think it's a good idea. For me personally, as an analyst, as a broadcaster, I don't love it.
You're a basketball person. I mean, your dad said you only have to watch the fourth quarter, and now people don't even do that these days, right? They're on their phone watching the highlights. They might watch the 10-minute YouTube clip. I mean, attention span has changed as well.
Yeah, it has. I mean, attention span especially has changed with TikTok and just 30-second videos, and people don't want to watch any longer than that. And that's why I think Adam Silver's doing it. I mean, he realizes the change of times. He's very aware of that, and I think that's what he's trying to do. But I just don't think that you can change every single thing. I mean, the MLB tried to do it too with the pitch clock, and yes, the game's a little bit faster, but also it's not that much faster. I mean, they try to change extra innings where you can have the guy on second base and you go through it, but you're still sitting through an entire baseball game at the end of the day. So it might make it a few minutes shorter or 30 minutes shorter, but I still think that, it's a full game of basketball. You got to play that at the end of the day. And then how does that affect, I always look at it as how does that affect the levels going lower than it? How does it affect the G League? How does it affect college basketball with two halves? How does it affect high school basketball as well? Because we see how games change, and we see even how the NBA has changed with Steph Curry, and how that's not only changed at the NBA level, but it's also changed the high school game as well. So it trickles down, and I think that's something that people need to realize too. It's not just the big leagues and the NBA and professional basketball. It kind of affects everything going downwards. So I get the attention span part, but you still got to sit there and watch a full game regardless. So,
all right, how would you grade the Morey tenure in Philly, the Hinkie era, the process? We might be still in the process. Who knows? It seemed more fun even when they were losing, right? Like you had these promising young players. When they lose now, it's just terrible. It's disastrous in a lot of ways. How would you grade what Morey has done with the Sixers and his tenure in Philly?
It's hard because I think it starts with the owner, if I'm going to be honest with you. I think Josh Harris has a lot going on with, of course, the Devils and now the Commanders as well. And I think that trickles down into that GM spot with Daryl Morey. What I will say about the 76ers, but I think this has been transcending since they haven't had superstars. I think each and every year they don't allow teams to develop. They bring in James Harden. They bring in Paul George. They're so worried about getting the next superstar because they are in win now mode. But when you look at teams, even like the Boston Celtics, they build around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They allow those guys to play together for a few years, and then they go on and win an NBA Finals.
They keep knocking on the door.
Right. So, and that's how you make a dynasty team, because you continue to have good teams, good players, and your star players continue to get better. Now, I think that's what the 76ers were trying to do with Ben Simmons. Clearly, he didn't step up to the plate, but at the same time, I don't think that you win an NBA Finals with having three-star players and nobody else to play around them. When you have vets that can't run up and down the floor, that are no longer in their prime like they used to be. Don't get me wrong, Kyle Lowry and Eric Gordon had a really good pass game for Philadelphia, but at the same time, I think it's tough. I understand what Morey is trying to do, but I think there's a lot of pressure in the Joel Embiid era coming to a close sooner than a lot of people want to think. I think that the front office knows that. They're not going to admit it. I think that they know that, so they're trying to bring in players that can go around him that are already at that superstar level. But, I just don't think it's working, and I think that has a lot to do more with them just trying to build around Joel Embiid and get a championship for the city. So if I had to give him a grade, it'd probably be like a B-, a C+. I don't think he's doing terrible. because of just of the circumstances. I mean, you're trying to build around a big guy, and you know that he doesn't have a lot of time. Now, granted, I don't agree with everything that he does, and, James Harden coming in and Paul George, it's not living up to expectations, but I think that a lot of people aren't looking at the circumstances, and I think it does start with the owner and trickles down.
All right, last thing before we get to rapid fire, and then we're out of here. Wilt Chamberlain, how do you feel when people say the 100-point game never happened?
Oh my gosh, people need to stop that. No matter what you're playing in, 100 points in a basketball game is so tough. Like, give him the respect that he deserves. I don't care if he was playing kids off the street. If you play pickup basketball, are you getting 100 points? If you're playing pickup basketball in the city, you were getting 100 points regardless. So the fact that he was able to get that in one game.
They're saying it didn't happen, Kayla.
It did. It happened. I truly, now granted, I wasn't alive to watch it, but I truly believe that it did happen. People don't think technology back then, it wasn't how it was and things like that. I just think there's too much conversation around it. I think that people need to stop saying it didn't happen. People love conspiracy theories, and they will run with whatever they have. So to me, it did happen. Absolutely. I'm giving Wilt all the credit.
It happened. I'm actually rereading a Pistol Pete book, and his coach, Coach Gurin, actually talked about in the game he was trying to get out of it by continually fouling because the other team, the Warriors, were just juicing it so he could get 100, and the game wasn't a game anymore. And, the refs didn't let him do it. They said, we know what you're doing. We know what you're doing. So, just those little stories within the stories, we know what really happened. Exactly.
I agree with you 100% on that. People that don't think it, keep your conspiracy theories to yourself. Give Wilt the respect he deserves, all right?
All right, last thing. Rapid fire. Greatest Sixers ever.
Sixers ever?
Sixer, a player. Greatest Sixer ever.
Allen Iverson is up there for me, but that's kind of biased because I was able to watch him play. So I might go AI in my book.
Right.
Or Dr. J.
Yeah, I think it would be Allen Iverson because you might rank Wilt Chamberlain and Dr. J higher than him, but they didn't have as long of a tenure. They were all over the place. So I would definitely, I would agree with you there. Best cheesesteak in Philly.
Oh, D'Alessandro's Wizwit.
Embiid or Cat?
Embiid, 100%. Any given day.
Right now?
I mean, Embiid's not playing right now, but Embiid can come back and still drop 25 on his head even if he's not 100%. So.
Okay. Best player in the G League?
Oh, I'm going to go Mac McClung with the Osceola Magic. He was a former Blue Coat. He can fly, and I love his game so much, Mac McClung. And he's really just a stand-up player, always going to talk to the fans after and everything like that. So I'm going to go Mac McClung.
Is he back in the dunk contest?
I'm not sure. They haven't announced that yet, but he should be. I mean, he won it 2 years with the Sixers. He should go with Orlando, but at the end of the day, he's such a good player. I love watching him in the G.
All right, last thing. Who wins the Super Bowl?
Philadelphia Eagles, baby. Let's go. Come on. All right. Let me just give my thoughts here. And I know it's rapid fire, but the Eagles lost in 04-05 to the Pats. They won in 17-18 to the Pats. They lost in 2023 to the Chiefs. So, it's just written in the stars. It's the script, NFL. Let's follow it, all right?
Okay. We'll end it there. Kayla, where can we find you? Social media? Everywhere else? Podcasts?
Yeah, so I do a podcast with Keith Pompey Monday through Friday on Locked On 76ers. You can find that on YouTube and Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Also on TikTok, I post a ton of sports content on there, Kayla Santiago 61. And then on Twitter, Kayla_Santiago1 is where you'll kind of see all the updates of what I'm doing on the daily, any new job postings, anything like that. That just keep up with me and my journey. And, I love what I do. So, yeah, you can follow me on there.
Kayla, thanks for taking the time. You're always welcome back, and talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Anytime.